junior Lucy Gelber practicing on her 29th day of her 100-day pledge to practice with her violin using a basic warm-up. She is part of the Grady Orchestra. Hello and welcome to the second edition of the Southerner Podcast. I am your host, Nafez Zohbi. We're going to begin this podcast session of this month with a brief interview with an alumni that visited on the 70th anniversary that occurred in last month. Afterwards, we're going to delve into the main discussion, which is our subject of this session, a healthy discussion of sexual education, mental health, and concussions. I'm joined by Coach Aldridge, Jack Hudson, Chandler Morris, and Olivia Podber on that segment. Afterwards, we're going to provide a brief sports update in terms of scores, wins, and losses, and we're going to conclude this session with a brief interview that I had with Mr. Hill, the new girls basketball coach. Questions were provided by our sports staff writer, Sean Sweeny. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the GNN staff for providing equipment that allows us to produce this type of outlet in having these discussions and possibly giving us an outlet in where we can further exemplify how we can be the voice of Grady. If you'd like to participate or support this podcast, you can wait till the end, and information will be provided in how you can help and possibly be involved with this. I encourage those of whom who would like to speak and provide comments to do so. This is an outlet for the students of Grady. I'd also like to thank Mr. Ellerton for approving this project in the first place. Furthermore, if you'd like to know how to also support the Southerner newspaper publication as well as the Nexus magazine publication, more information will be regarded towards that in the end, as well as all of the articles that we mentioned will be linked in the description, as well as our website and the other possible outlets that the Southerner podcast will be on, which will be SoundCloud and YouTube, I believe. That should cover all the things that are about to occur in this month's session. We hope you enjoy the show. So let's just get right into it.
I'm sure the thing blew up by then. You've gotten so many things going on. So yeah.
That's true. Okay, so you are
Robert Robinson.
That's a good name. Robert. I mean, isn't it? Okay, and class of 77.
Class of 77, yes.
Very nice. Okay, so coming back here to Grady and thinking about Grady, I mean, is there anything?
It's mind blowing. You guys are lucky. You have so much more now. So much. I can't stress that enough. You all have so much more. You should be really just soaking in everything that you can possibly get. I didn't have half of this stuff.
Yeah.
It was so funny. I've always joked about this, but when I went here, computers were just becoming the thing.
Yeah.
There was a computer lab on the first floor, and it took up the size of a whole classroom.
No way.
I was not a computer nerd at that time. We were not allowed to go in that room because it was probably the most expensive thing in the school.
Wow.
And it could only play just minor games. And I'm sure that what that computer do is probably only a tenth of what your phone can do now.
Maybe so.
Sad but true.
Maybe so.
And we were always just joking about that big room. It was just one big brick in there that had bells and whistles and everything in there. So.
Gosh. So since then, have you become a computer nerd?
Yes, I had to become a computer nerd. Yes.
How so? What classifies you as a computer nerd?
Well, I've got several computers. I run a recording studio, so I have Mac and PC. So yeah, I had to become a computer nerd.
Yeah.
I had no choice in the matter.
I believe it.
I started when it was just reel-to-reel, and then when it went to ADATs, and then computers, and so I had to learn. There's no excuse now.
That's true. So So what sort of clubs were you in at Grady?
I was in tennis, but my most notary was I was senior class president of class 77.
Wow.
So I'm not really sure. I think I was the first African-American president. I'm not really sure, but yeah, class of 77, I was senior class president.
That's great.
I can't remember all the other stuff, but I'm sure you can look in that yearbook up there and find me. I had the biggest afros. But yeah, I was Beta Club president and yes, senior class president.
That's great. So what did you do as senior class president? No?
Oh, it was so funny. I can't even remember.
I don't blame you. I don't even remember.
I can't even remember. I was in drama class also. I think, I can't even remember the name of the play. It's going to drive me crazy. But I remember my character was Donald, and that was it. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty funny. So.
And I was in chorus. So, yeah, I digress. Now it's all coming back to me now. Yeah.
Nice. Did you have any people here, like a classmate or a teacher, that was particularly influential in your life?
Miss Cook was pretty influential. She was my guidance counselor. I'm trying to think of so many other people. It's sad. I will probably think of that and I will say, dang, I should have said that when I was sitting here. But Miss Cook was, yeah.
Nice.
She was my guidance counselor.
That's great. That's great. So this is always a fun one. Did you ever pull any pranks here?
Oh my goodness! And I don't want. And those are gonna die with me. Those pranks right there. I cannot. I'm gonna rat out everybody else. The year that during the time I was here, the big thing was across the country was streaking. I don't know if you all know what that was. You know what that is? We had 3 students that did that. And Carlene Archer will be able to tell the rest of that story. But yeah, they had the mask and they ran through campus and I don't know how they got ratted on.
Wait. So they wear a mask and they just run through campus naked?
Exactly.
Was it like a mask of a president or was it like, because I know that was common. No, that was really common.
I don't remember the exact situation, but it was up from the 2nd or 3rd floor all the way out to the parking lot.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So yeah, I get to rat them out, but no,
Not for you.
I'm sure if we had more students, they would tell on me. But there's nothing, no Facebook, so you won't find much about it. Nothing.
Oh my gosh. Were there any sort of like rules that you felt were really unfair at Grady?
Dang.
Or just silly.
They're just silly rules. It was just silly rules. I mean, here's a funny thing. That catwalk that you all have out there, right? You know what that is, right? When I first got here in 72, students were allowed to smoke on campus.
They were?
Yes. And they had the smokers' breaks, and I didn't smoke at the time or anything. I just hung out with them. I was I want to smoke too. So I hung out with them out on that catwalk, and that's where they were able to smoke. I thought this was just
Students got smoking breaks?
Smoking breaks on the catwalk.
It was legal when you're 17.
Yeah, it was legal then. It was crazy. Of course, it was 16. Yeah, I can. They did that out there. So, yeah.
Do you have a favorite field trip or adventure that you went on with friends during your high school years?
I cannot think of one. It's sad. I wasn't prepared for this. I would have just steadied up for this and went to the yearbook. I can tell this story. No. Other than being in chorus, that was about it, or school plays or stuff like that. That's about it.
What do you think was your most memorable moment in Grady?
I would have to say running for senior class president and winning.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, here's the thing. When I came here in 72, I didn't know anybody. I came here from Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Lived about a mile down. I was probably the first black family that was on that block, so I didn't know anybody there. I was pretty shy, so I didn't know anybody. I took drama class just so I could be able to talk in front of people because I was just petrified. So I remember being in the old gym, which used to be the girls' gym. That's where we had the pep rallies. And saying this speech and doing all this stuff, and then finding out later I had won, and I'm like, wow, I am actually popular. So I didn't know that. So I think that was a victory for me. That was a victory from being totally shy and not knowing anybody and making friends just gradually, and that was like accomplishments. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, I don't. You told us a bunch of sides.
Oh, yeah, I don't think we can get better than senior class.
Well,
president.
yeah, I wish I had the other stories, which would probably overshadow that,
Oh,
but that's
no.
about all I know.
That's great.
That's about all I can remember right now.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you got to, talk with us about
Well, I'm
senior
so
class
glad that
president.
this happened. I was able to do this because I would love to be able to have that in a time capsule for somebody else to, listen to and see how it was back in the day and appreciate what you have now because this is incredible. I can't stress that enough. If I had all this stuff, there's no telling how fast I would have gotten to where I needed to be. So.
Yeah,
Well, thank you, I guess. I mean, it's really just been.
Thank you all. I appreciate this, and I'm hoping that.
And perhaps we'll talk about a little bit of concussions. I'm joined by Chandler Morris.
Hi, I'm Chandler. I'm Southerner Online Managing Editor as well as Assistant Managing Editor for News of Southerner.
I'm also joined by Olivia Podber.
Hi, I'm Olivia, and I'm the co-editor-in-chief of the Southerner.
And we have a special guest teacher.
Hi, I'm Miss Aldridge. I teach health and PE, and I'm also the department chair here at Grady.
Wonderful. And I'm Nafez Zohbi, of course. But you'll hear my voice later out. Let's just get right into it. I'd like to start off with the Georgia Tech crisis that occurred. Chandler, do you want to just introduce the topic a little of what happened and anything else that might go along with it?
Yeah, so as many people in the Atlantic community know, earlier this year, there was a student at Georgia Tech who had mental health issues and was shot by a police officer after turning himself in or calling a report for himself. So many people say that it was suicide. There have been some discussions of police brutality, but it's undisputed that he was suffering from mental illness. And so this incident kind of opened the door to a lot of conversations about mental health at Georgia Tech, which when I talked to students and alumni and professors at Georgia Tech, they definitely all agreed that mental health services do need to be stepped up on the campus, which definitely affects Grady students because most people consider Georgia Tech as an in-state school that they would like to go to, and it's definitely a factor in the overall university atmosphere. So the main complaint was that the counseling staff in mental health services was very limited. There's a maximum of 16 counseling sessions per student for your whole tenure at Georgia Tech. After you reach that maximum, you're sent off campus to see a therapist, which is expensive for most students, as a lot of healthcare services doesn't cover that, or if it does, you still have to pay part of it.
Are students even aware that they get those 16 sessions, I guess included in their tuition perhaps, is it?
I think most students are aware, but 16 counseling sessions over 4 years for a student that is suffering from severe mental health issues just isn't enough.
Sure, it's totally inadequate.
Especially for the stress that being at a school like Georgia Tech brings. And also the counseling staff is made up of 15 counselors for 21,884 students. So that means that it's very hard to get in with a counselor. So a lot of students can't even use their full 16 counseling sessions because they're unable to get in. It takes months to schedule an appointment with a counselor.
Right, and at that point, the mental health issue, whatever they're trying to battle, deal, and cope with, has perhaps escalated at that point.
Yes, definitely. And this issue also kind of just sheds light on the mental health crisis in this country and Georgia in specific, not only in public universities, but also public high schools. I spoke with the social worker at Grady High School who directs kind of mental health awareness, and faculty at Grady, they are trained to deal with mental health crises, but there's only a limited amount of things that faculty can do for their students if they notice that someone is struggling from mental health issues. For example, students that come forward and say that they're struggling with their mental health are sent off campus to mental health facilities, which once again usually have a cost. So this puts
However, if you don't mind me adding, the social worker did include that a lot of these facilities can be utilized or gone to for free, without cost.
Yes, definitely. There are those in existence in Atlanta, except it's because they're free to the public. It's a much longer wait time. It's much harder to get in. There's limits because of location, and also a lot of them are losing funding because a lot of them take donations or they're not funded by the state. So it's very hard to get in, and a lot of the existence of these free mental health centers are diminishing because of a lack of funding.
And can we even just back up to the fact of a student having the self-awareness to be able to say that I'm struggling in the first place? I mean, because mental health, generally speaking, doesn't get the attention that it needs, and people don't know how to ask for help. And so even just getting to that step, you know, as a society, especially here in Georgia, we need to work harder on awareness just to make people feel more comfortable.
Yeah, of course.
So I was wondering, what's the national look on all of this, and also is there a gender disparity between how likely boys in high school and college and girls in high school and college are able to tackle mental health crises? If you know.
If in regards to the gender thing, I don't know specifically, if I might add, in regards to certain college mental health statistics. However, in high school, between at least between the ages of 15 and 24, girls have a 30% chance higher of dealing with or having a mental illness episode in regards to a mental health crisis, according to the United States Health Department. So I just wanted to add that. So there is a huge, there is a difference between the two genders in terms of having the mental health episode.
I think there's also research that shows that boys are definitely less likely to come forward and ask for help just because of cultural influences about gender. And I think it's definitely hard because in public universities, obviously, there's no one watching to make sure that you're mentally healthy. And in high school, we have one social worker who she really tries to look out for the students to see their behavior in class if anything indicates that there is a mental health issue there. But Georgia really doesn't have much funding for schools for mental health services. So we only have that one social worker, so there's really not much we can do to prevent a mental health crisis. It's kind of just there's a mental episode, and then we try to figure out how to place that
reactive
student.
Instead of
Yes,
proactive to the
definitely.
situations. I mean, I can speak, I guess, from experience that my husband actually committed suicide 2 years ago. And being, with the so-called training that we have as teachers, or even just being a health teacher and teaching mental health, I didn't see the signs. I was totally blindsided by it. And, hindsight's 2020, but, it's just we're reactive to situations instead of proactive. And it's just unfortunate that we don't have, we just don't view mental health the same way that we do physical health, because with physical health, you can see it a lot of times, like crutches and stitches and people being, bedridden, and we're empathetic towards it. But, it's difficult to be empathetic towards something you can't actually see. So yeah, I think there needs to be more of a conversation towards mental health and access to it.
Definitely. And I think it also varies kind of state by state. Overall, in the U.S., there is definitely a problem with how we view mental health issues, but I think there's some states who have better funding towards mental health services. However, Georgia just doesn't really allocate much budget towards that in public schools and public universities.
Right. I mean, and I can just speak also, again, dealing with the fallout of my husband's suicide, that looking into counseling and trying to heal myself from that and just kind of going through it, that, seeking out counseling, and you get the first session to see if there's anything they can quote unquote diagnose you with. But in order to have your insurance to pay for it, or my insurance anyways, Blue Cross Blue Shield, that I'm personally with, you have to be diagnosed with something to continue to get insurance coverage. And I'm just like, ooh, do I really want a diagnosis on my record? Would that affect potentially life insurance policies down the road, which they do say could potentially exclude you from life insurance? So then for me, I kind of pulled back and I didn't go forward with that because I was like, ooh, I don't know what the long-term fallout of that is.
I think there's also a lot of university students and students who just don't come forward because they don't want to be diagnosed with something like bipolar depression or something that there is a stigma attached to, which on their record, if future employers do see this, then it could potentially hurt them in their job search. And I think that's definitely a huge issue for people in the workforce, students about to enter the workforce, and just the whole stigma attached to mental health in America.
Right.
In regards to also people not willing to go to the social worker, while I was presenting this idea for this podcast topic, a lot of people are like, I don't want to talk about, because I did speak with a lot of people who would possibly be good candidates to speak on this subject, who do suffer from depression or have gone to a counselor or a social worker or a professional and have discussed their issues. But a lot of them who just didn't use the school social worker mentioned that if you do go to the school social worker, that they automatically have to contact your parents, and they have to be farther involved in probably much than they probably should be, because I feel like just talking to a social worker could help. But perhaps I was thinking, in the event of, say, a student who's having an issue, say, with their parent as well, that could contribute to their mental health, because certainly the people around you in your environment could contribute to that. They're immediately notified of that.
I get both sides of the story on that. Like, as far as like, you want to reach out to the parent, because if I do have a child, I would want to know what was going on with my child. But at the same time, I don't understand, like with the HIPAA policies and HIPAA laws, like, at what point does that kick in? I guess I'm just not super educated on that, because if you were to go to a doctor, I think at a certain age, I'm not sure, maybe 13, 15, I'm not sure, that if my child went independently with HIPAA laws, that would protect them from sharing that information with me. So it's that gray area again. You would hope that a child has supportive family members, but that isn't always the case.
Yeah. I'd also like to mention a couple of statistics in regards to mental health in general on a national level. 20% of the youth age 13 to 18 live with a mental health condition, according to the the National Mental Health Society. 11% of the youth also have a mood disorder, and 10% of youth have a behavior or conduct disorder, and 8% of the youth have an anxiety disorder. Certainly, you can receive anxiety through a lot of this the schoolwork that you would receive as well. Just on a curious note, we do recognize certain flaws, and I recall that the article did mention that all faculty are supposed to be trained in some way or another of how to deal with a student and if they're suffering through a mental health crisis or whatnot. Have you been trained by Grady staff, possibly?
Sure, we do have a social worker come out and report and share, some things that we should look for, the steps to take if we have any concerns about, any kind of mental health issues, any kind of abuse, neglect, and the channels to go would be to report to the social worker and administrator. And then we kind of leave it there because they're a little bit more trained with how to deal with that. But I would just say I feel, somewhat inadequate. That is someone having a bad day, or is it a mental health, episode that you're using as the terminology? I guess, it's a gray area, and it's just really challenging.
Sure. Yeah. do you guys have any idea how we could possibly provide a solution towards this, or possibly deal with the situation better in a more efficient and caring way? Just curious. We're not. I'm not. It's not possible to have a solution right now. But yeah.
I wanted to add, like, with going back to the Scott Schultz incident at Georgia Tech, he had signs of showing depression, and so given that, do you guys think that there is a solution for students who maybe aren't like undercover in showing there are signs of depression, but are like outwardly so, and who have had previous incidents in the past where he had attempted suicide before? So, like, given those signs, is there anything that can be done from like a high school view or like a high school or like a public university view?
I think the main two things is, one, just better resources. For instance, Grady High School, we only have one social worker, and Georgia Tech only has 15 counselors for the whole student population. And if there's a greater amount of funding within the state for these public universities and public schools, then we'll be able to hire more of a counseling staff to be a support network for these students who are struggling. And then also just education on mental health awareness. If there's more of an education, then people won't be as ashamed to come forward, and they'll be able to recognize the signs themselves if there is a problem, and their friends and family can also recognize those signs that someone needs help.
Right, and I think that education piece needs to start really early, really young, giving kids even the tools and the vocabulary to put words onto how they're feeling and express that, like starting in elementary school. I feel with the social emotional learning that APS is trying to do, I feel like that is starting to try to, give students a safe place to feel like they can maybe reach out to a caring adult in the building. But I feel like it needs to be more intentional. They throw out the buzzword educating a whole child, but I don't know if we necessarily do that when we get so caught up on test scores all the time that the social emotional piece sometimes falls to the wayside, especially with teachers' evaluations and everything else that goes along with that whole idea.
Yeah, that sounds great. By the way, it's 10:31. If you wanna. Yeah. That's all for Chandler Morris. Thank you for joining us, Chandler Morris. Now we're joined with Jack Hudson. Jack, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Oh, I'm the assistant managing editor of sports for the Southerner. I've been on staff for my entire high school. I play soccer. I play goalkeeper. So, yeah, that's me.
All right. So, in regards to what we were talking about through mental health, we not recently, but in issue 2, Caleb Weinstock wrote an article regarding CTE and concussions and whatnot. And Jack, I believe that you helped organize that page as well.
I did, yeah, page 15.
And you play soccer as well.
I do, yes.
And it was mentioned that also, like, whether it's football or soccer or any sport that you risk being damaged, you can get CTE or develop CTE, which can also lead to mental health issues, including suicide and whatnot. So can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah,
or can you at least tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's really scary. I don't know. When I saw like the statistics for that study, it was something like 97% of like NFL players had it in the study, and then like 95 college football players, and then like 20-something high school football players had it. And it's really shocking that there's not more like stuff done about it, because like it's the money that surrounds it that really influences it. So like you can't just get rid of football. You can't just get rid of these sports because there's just like this huge fan base and all the because it's a $1 billion industry. So I don't know how you really you can't really like change the helmets. You can't really do anything like that because the brain is still rattling around inside your head. So whatever you do to the helmet's not going to do anything because you can't put more padding inside of your head. So like, and then the aftermath for like when you're getting older. I think Brett Favre, one of the guy that retired, Brett Favre. He said it like. He was talking to his wife about it and like about some like soccer game of his daughter's, and he said he didn't remember any of it, and like he didn't remember that his daughter had ever played soccer, and she had played soccer for like 10 years, and it was quite remarkable how like he just had this void in his mind. And then I don't know, you got guys that are committing like it was Aaron Hernandez who's doing like just like ridiculous stuff, and then they look at these brains and they're so deformed, they're like black, and it's really scary.
Sure. But in regards not only to CDE, but I also wanted to talk about concussions because I believe that Caleb Weinstock also wrote about concussions as well, and he wanted to connect that topic to this story. Have you or any of your friends had concussions?
Yeah, I've had two. Yeah, I got one in middle school and I got one this year, and it wasn't like they're not them very serious, but it's it's very concerning once you get if you get hit in the head. There's like they follow a protocol, but something that I like didn't really understand is our school didn't really have. We're supposed to get this concussion test, and I haven't necessarily had one. And I don't want to like expose, but I just haven't had it yet. And like
a concussion, what?
I think there's a high school.
It's like a pre-assessment. Like,
yeah.
It analyzes like your cognitive ability, and so then it's like a pre-assessment to see how your brain functions without a concussion. And then if there's a suspected concussion, you can take a very similar test. It's probably not. I don't know if it's the same answers or not. I can't speak on that. Then they can compare the results to see if your brain is functioning the same way as it was before, and to help use that as one of the steps to clear you back to play, to make sure that you're being safe. Because I do feel like we rush as much as we can as high school students wanting to get back in the game, for example. We rush trying to our recovery when you can't really rush it.
Yeah.
I mean, we can slow it down, if anything else, by going back into schoolwork full mode, watching too much, screen time,
the bright lights. It's a bruise on your brain, so the only way is like...
Yeah, just time is really the only thing, and pulling away from things that can aggravate, the concussion, really, the bruising of the brain.
Yeah, it's, so that's something that I've never had that test here, and it's very like, I don't know. I just feel like there should be more done within, because I go to the doctor and they're like, oh, do you have a trainer on site at your school? And we don't necessarily have one that's always there. So it's just maybe more attention could be made to the physician aspect of it.
Sure. Olivia, did you ever have a concussion or at all? Okay, I was just curious. As a teacher, Miss Aldridge, you certainly must have had students who had concussions that were in your class.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Well, there's this. I in for club soccer, this one kid. He was playing and he played in my league, and he got kicked in the head so hard that he woke up only speaking Spanish. He hadn't been fluent beforehand, and he woke up speaking Spanish, and then now he's having trouble with seizures and stuff like that. So it's really you can't treat it like another injury. It's something that there needs to be more research done into it.
But certainly you have had students with concussions or in your class. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Right. So when we're notified with a student getting concussion, usually we kind of get an outline of the protocol that, if they need to put their head down to rest, and, usually it's that they're out for a few days depending on the severity of the concussion, with the lights off and all, whatever the protocol is. And then they come, for half days. And so I feel badly for the students, because, they can't focus a lot of times, or it's painful to try to focus as much as they are. Then they start to fall behind in work, and it's this kind of this vicious cycle. And again, it's difficult because as far as training goes, I'm not trying to be funny, but we're not doctors. And so we don't know as much as maybe we probably should in order to be empathetic as well and make the modifications in order for a successful transition back into a regular school day, besides just, let them rest. And if they need to go home, they're welcome to go home or go to to the nurse's office to rest as well.
Yeah, well, when I would come back, I didn't necessarily feel like telling all my teachers, because I didn't want to be like, oh, I can't take this test because I have a concussion. That's just didn't seem very fair to me. So, and then I had trouble with missing work. So I just feel like there should have been more of they should have been, I probably should have done better making them aware of it, but also
a better safety net.
Yeah.
Transitioning you back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of similarities into what we just discussed in terms of concussions, as well as how the school deals with mental health issues. You weren't here, Jack, but we were also talking about how certain students
it's not exactly the same subject, but it's not how students would come out about their certain situation. Because, I mean, we're high school students. I don't expect everyone to be, like...
So forthcoming.
Yeah, so forthcoming about anything, really. Whether it's their mental health issue or their concussion. And it's a constant pattern of inadequacy. Also, because we probably don't even have enough funding for it. I don't even have certain textbooks for classes, so I don't really expect having a person there 24/7 to if I do have a concussion.
Yeah, well, no, I'll talk to people from like that go to private schools, and it's all about the money because they have physicians on staff, and they have like people who can like if you get a small injury, they can like wrap you up before a game or something like that. And I just don't like have that interaction between someone who's always here because we do have a trainer, but she just comes in for like games and stuff like that. No one like that's on site every day. So, yeah.
But I also, it feels like we're talking about a lot of inadequacies, but I also wanted, since we're running out of time here, I'd like to discuss the sexual education here at Grady. Olivia Podber wrote the story, I believe, alongside, did you write it alongside this one?
No, I wrote it all by myself.
All right. Can you just, for a second, tell us why you even wrote the story? What made you think of writing the story in the first place?
Right. Okay, so over the summer I watched this documentary that it was called Let's Talk About Sex, and it basically compared sexual education in European countries to sexual health education in America. And the disparities that were brought out in this documentary were disgusting to me. In Europe, the way that they tackle it is like in kindergarten. That's when they start talking about sex, and it's this family discussion where families are super involved in educating their children about it, so children don't grow up with a premise of it being this dirty, disgusting thing. Whereas in America, I feel like it's a shameful thing until you are married, especially in the South. It's considered, you're either a virgin or you're not a virgin, and you're shamed either way. We just never had discussions about it in my family, not because my family was super Southern, but just because it wasn't considered appropriate to talk about. And in, I think, middle school, I had a semester class of health where we talked about it for maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And kids just laughed at it because it's considered funny. And in high school, I have not taken health yet, and I'm a senior.
Oh,
so,
me neither.
Yeah, I need to take it next semester. But even then, before they implemented the Flash program, as you know, it was not something that was discussed seriously or thoroughly. So I decided to write the story to see how the sexual health program had been taught before Flash was implemented, and then with Flash, which is this really progressive thing that started in Seattle and is now making waves around the country, how that's helped students at Grady. Basically what I found was before Flash, the teaching was very subjective. So I know Miss Aldridge, I heard reports that you were very interested in talking about sexual education because it is important, and so you would give students an opportunity to ask questions about it and to lead discussions on it. But you had hesitations because Georgia was an abstinence-only state, so of course there's only so much that you can legally say without breaking those boundaries.
Sure. I'd like to keep my job.
I
mean, let's be clear.
Yeah.
I interviewed one student who is lesbian, and she took your class in 2015, and she basically described her experience as embarrassing because she felt like she had to explain all about the LGBTQ community, and she was put on this pedestal where, because there wasn't a discussion about it in the curriculum, she was the curriculum. And as a student, I don't think she felt like that was the way that she wanted the education to go.
Sure, and I feel horrible that was, in hindsight, how she, and perhaps even in the moment, how she felt about it. Obviously, okay, I wasn't aware that's what her feelings were. I feel like that particular student, my perception of that, I'm not trying to defend it, is it seemed as though she felt comfortable talking about it. And because I had those constraints, and she was really articulate and very respectful, and I felt like her peers really were like, oh, okay, and it was an intelligent conversation. It seemed like she was volunteering and it didn't mind. Now, I feel awful when I read the article, and it made her feel uncomfortable, and that was a teacher fail, a huge one. Like
No, but there's like not much you could have done because it's not like legally you could have explained that. So I think it was responsible for you to have somebody who wanted to, and she is very outgoing with her viewpoints, and so I think in like one like side she was comfortable with talking about it, and she was glad that she was given the opportunity to actually talk about it and enlighten students who didn't know anything about it. But you know, from like a teenager perspective, that's also just embarrassing to have all of your peers like turn on you as
all
soon
the
as one
attention
thing is mentioned. Like,
right,
as soon as
and
the
so
word
you're
gay is
you're
mentioned,
that student, you're
she's
that
that
the
student,
expert, you know, great, but you're that student
And
in that unit.
she's 15 years old at
Right.
that point, so that's just in that situation.
Sure,
I think she's
again, I feel awful.
Oh, like you said, it's not really your fault. This is
Yeah.
the system, and the inadequacy of the system is really at the spotlight here occasionally. But there is the introduction of that Flash program.
Yes.
Do you mind talking a little bit about the Flash program and how you think it's changed
Sure.
very much?
So
perhaps
this
in comparing.
is so this is the second semester that Grady's been doing Flash. Last semester we last spring semester we piloted it, and it seemed to get really positive feedback from students, positive feedback from teachers. I really liked that it was values neutral, which took a huge weight off of our shoulders, because I feel it is difficult as humans to separate yourself sometimes by imposing your own values. But I mean, we were encouraged, like, if students ask whatever question, as long as it's an appropriate question, meaning that it's not disrespectful, that, you know, we can address it and say, you know, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. And go into the medical side of whatever the question is, and, you know, but not put our values on it, and say, you know, if you have any more questions, I encourage you to go back and talk with the people who you trust, you know, whether it be your parents, or if you're a part of a, you know, a religious group, or, you know, your doctor, or whatever, because I mean, whatever is important to you, usually they have the similar values, but to not shame any question. And I just love that it seems like it's more inclusive.
Yeah, definitely. Jack, did you take health?
I did.
You did?
Yeah.
When did you take health?
Was that like sophomore year? Probably. Yeah, sophomore year.
So pre-Flash.
Yeah, I guess so. Not to be like, it's not vulgar, but like in the movies they always like hand out.
You can be as vulgar as you want.
Condoms.
Yeah.
I never had that experience, which like isn't a bad thing. I was just like surprised that I thought that was like everybody did that or something.
Yeah, no, we're not allowed to hand out condoms,
Okay.
and in APS we're not allowed to do the condom demonstration. That is actually part of the Flash curriculum.
Why?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I'm not sure why that decision was made.
Uh-huh.
So I can't speak on why it wasn't made.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the question, you know, if students are like, well, how do you, like, at a genuine, like, hey, how do you use it? I mean, I think we're just kind of like encouraged to say, well, yeah, I think there's directions on the box, or, you know, I'm sure that you can research. And so it kind of puts it down. But then there's like, you know, is it a reliable resource they're researching?
We did have someone come from the middle school and do she did this big assembly. This is about sexual education. You don't, I don't know.
In Inman?
Yeah, in Inman.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
What year?
I don't know. I don't remember exactly at all.
I think we only talked about sex like in 7th grade, and that was it. Like in biology.
It, but she was like came in and it was like gave this all like, I don't know, like kind of similar stuff. Don't use 2 condoms and stuff like that. And like, I don't know, just like general information about that. And she got up and talked about it, and it was the same kind of thing. A lot of people laughed and stuff like that.
Okay, so I actually didn't know the thing about APS not allowing the demonstration of a condom, but
Yes.
when I did this survey to ask students if they thought that a comprehensive sexual education encouraged students to have sex, and 85% reported that it did not, but that still means that there is a percentage who thought that it did. And so I think there's this whole idea, especially in southern states, that if you teach students how to have sex, they are going to have sex, and that is completely disregarding the fact that right now teenagers are sexually active, with or without being taught how to have sex.
I believe 47%, was it? Or
Yeah, so 40% of Grady students were sexually active, and 67% said they did not know how to use a condom. And that's startling because
It's scary.
it's very scary.
I mean, we have like the boogie factor of like pregnancy, but, you know, diseases in our zip code are super high for sexually transmitted infections.
Right, in Georgia, I think we're one of the highest for like chlamydia and herpes, especially among teenagers, which is not surprising if you like take into account that schools are not teaching sex because they don't want to encourage students to have sex.
Not teaching how to use it, but then also not having access to it, because
Right.
there is that, society that, that we shame people, like, do you really want to be, going into your CVS and buying, or whatever your drugstore is, and buying the box of condoms, being responsible and making responsible choices when, sex has been so secretive and not talked about, which is that kind of like vicious cycle that we're in right now.
That was another thing in that documentary that I watched. It asked like students in I think Denmark, if a guy had a condom in his wallet, how would you perceive that? And all the girls, they were like, that's super responsible of him. Like, I really respect that. They did the same thing over, I think it was in like suburban Georgia, and everyone was like, he is like a man whore and he's out to get into your pants. It was again considered this like really dirty thing if a guy was being responsible.
Right, and like even if we were to flip the script, like what happens if a female had a condom in her purse?
It
Like
was even
OMG,
worse.
right?
Right, but with the implementation of the Flash program, I think it has the potential to really change how things are being taught, not only at Grady, but around the country, and decreasing the stigma that there is around sexual education and making it not such a dirty thing, but something that needs to be properly educated on, because it's something that is happening every single day.
Yeah, especially like I come from a really religious background, and I will never ever speak about sex with my parents ever in my life. So this is really the only outlet I'm really able to learn, even though I'm good. But I remember in 7th grade, the only sexual education I ever had was an egg project and watching a video made in the 70s or 80s about a woman being pregnant. But that's it. That's literally it. Like. And then we were just surrounded by, you're gonna get like HIV immediately. Like that's like basically
it's that fear factor, as opposed to Flash is a little bit more progressive. So I'm really thankful that we have it.
Yeah,
it was like nothing. I feel like it's just not been comprehensive at all. There's no, it's bizarre.
Yeah. So unfortunately, Oh yeah, of course.
This is with Flash. Like I really appreciate it, but I've heard some pretty bad things about the online health education. Because it is still abstinence keyed. So one of my friends took it this semester, and she said that there was a prompt, because you have these journal prompts, and it was basically like your friend is considering having sex. How do you talk them out of it? And it's like stuff like that is super.
And it's shaming you, really. Because it's again putting someone else's values that sex before marriage is a bad thing when that's your personal value.
If you think you're ready for it, you should be ready for it. I don't know. I think so. Flash is good. I think we need to make that uniform across the board so everybody's getting the same education.
All right. So I feel like, unfortunately, we're running out of time. We ran out of time, essentially. That's pretty much it. We had a healthy discussion about sex and mental health, and as well as concussions and CTE. So I'd like to thank all of you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Roderick Antonio Hill.
All right.
That's my full name.
And I believe that you are the new girls basketball coach?
Correct, yes. I am the new girls varsity and junior varsity, I guess we would say interim JV coach. We're looking to fill that position right now, actually. So
why?
Because it's vacant. So
yourself is
yeah. It's too many jobs.
All right.
Too many jobs. But no, it's actually fine. It's no big deal. But I had a JV person involved, and they had some emergency come up, so I had to fill that role myself.
Do you recall the last coach's name?
It's Coach Varner.
Yes.
I'd rather, Coach Varner.
All right. I probably didn't even introduce myself. I just went right into it. My name is Nafez Zohbi.
All right.
I'm here with Mr. Hill. Questions by Sean Sweeny. And this is, all right, let's get started. So what made you choose Grady as a place to go?
Well, it's actually, I was at Inman last year, Inman Middle School.
Yeah.
And just coming over here, following the girls, a lot of the girls that were with me in 9th grade.
Yeah.
Or 8th grade, in 7th grade.
Gotcha.
They're over here now, and so I just kind of wanted to follow my girls over here to the high school, and the opportunity came about, and I jumped on it. So.
All right. So you were the girls' basketball coach?
Yes, at Inman Middle. Yeah, for 2 years there. Yeah, and we did pretty good. We were pretty successful. We went to the championship 2 years straight.
Wow.
and I think we maybe only lost maybe 4 games in 2 years.
Yeah.
So we had a great year. Great year. Yeah.
What's the most exciting part of the season to look forward to?
Actually, I'm more excited about the preparation part. So actually preseason and postseason, as opposed to being in season. But I like the girls preparing and prepping, and then just seeing what the output of what they put in during the season.
Yeah.
During the off season, excuse me, and just seeing those results. And they're making gains. I like to see that. So I just like to see the girls grow and just make improvements throughout the year.
Yeah.
So and that's why I coach. I coach so they can become better people, better citizens, better athletes. Just it's really about the girls and just their progression through middle school and high school.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most important thing that you need to see in your players?
Just commitment, I think, and then just a good, strong work ethic. I tell the girls all the time that just putting if you're not so talented, if you don't have these God-given gifts, that you can work with what you have, but put in a lot of work, put in a lot of time.
Yeah.
And to get better at something, especially like basketball, which requires so many different skills, you just have to put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it's not going to happen overnight. And I think they can see that, they can apply this to other parts of their lives. I think is really important.
Yeah. What are your expectations for this year?
Ooh, wow, that's a good question. Well, basically, I'm pretty optimistic. My expectations are just for us to grow, to develop. So I'm expecting for all girls that are on that team to not be the same girl they are by the end of the season, and there has to be a positive change. So any kind of net gain in athleticism, their academics, in their offensive awareness or their defensive awareness, whether any kind of net gain in the positive direction, obviously, will be is what I'm expecting. That's where my expectations are. As far as wins and losses, I'm not really concerned about wins and losses this year. This is sort of a rebuilding year.
Yeah.
And I want to focus on just their growth, and I think that if they, put in the work, we'll be fine, from years to come. So,
how's practice so far?
Practice is going pretty good. We have about 10 girls. Sometimes we have 9. Sometimes we have 8. It just depends on the day.
Yes.
But practice is pretty consistent. It's about an hour practice, hour and a half practice. The girls are engaged in practice. They like coming to practice from what I can tell so far.
Yeah.
We practice at game speed. We at least try to, just to kind of replicate game-like situations. But that's about it.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that you're interim right now.
No, that was sort of a joke, I guess.
My bad.
But no, I am the actual head varsity coach. But I am also filling in the role of the JV coach as well.
Sure.
Right now, temporarily.
Can you tell us a little bit about the varsity team?
Yeah, the varsity team essentially is the JV team. We have a very, very young team.
Yeah.
We have Trinity Lewis, Jalea Lett. Trinity is in 9th grade, and Jalea Lett is in 10th grade.
Yeah.
We do have a couple of upperclassmen, Juliana Markman, and we also have Jada Ragland. She's a senior, Jada is. But majority of the team is young, and so, it's a varsity team, of course, and I'm looking to just make sure those 9th graders and those 10th graders are, developing at a good rate, and and they're getting a good competition in practice and during games. So
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
That's really all the questions I really have for you regarding the girls basketball business. On an unrelated note, we sort of have a theme right now for our podcast, and we're talking about concussions. Have you ever had a concussion before?
Actually, no, I have not. Thankfully, I have not, but I have seen incidences where
Yeah.
athletes have received concussions. And it's something that is something it's an issue now. If you look at NFL sports,
Yeah.
Or NFL football, excuse me, you see a lot of it there. With basketball, we have concussions. Obviously we don't wear pads, but it is a physical sport, but not as physical as something like football or rugby or even soccer. And so we don't have as many, but that is that fear there that girls can possibly get concussions. So
Yeah.
we're very aware of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty much it. Any final thoughts, Mr. Hill?
Thank you for the podcast.
No
Thank you
problem.
for doing it.
So this was Nafez Zohbi and Mr. Hill discussing girls basketball, and questions were provided by sports writer Sean Sweeny. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you so much again.
Mm-hmm.
We're about ready to conclude this session for the month. If you would like to support the podcast in terms of either production or participating in the discussions, or perhaps providing art, that is more than encouraged. All you have to do is email GradySouthernerPodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on either our SoundCloud or YouTube outlet. Or, if you'd like, you can speak to me in person if you do know me. And all sorts of things can be helped. Scheduling, production in terms of logistics and specifications of technology, or just general ideas. We're still open to change our name from Southerner Podcast to something else. We want to further exemplify this to be the voice of Grady. Any ideas, and all ideas are welcome, and we encourage people to participate in these discussions, no matter what grade level or mindset you come from. It's highly, highly encouraged. If you also would like to participate in terms of the art, you can send your art to the Grady Southerner podcast@gmail.com email, and we need help with, like, say, banners and whatnot. That's accepted as well. And if you'd like previous art that you've done and you'd like to possibly provide a meaning towards it, or a paragraph or a summary and some description towards it, that can be used on our visual aspect of the YouTube outlet, so we don't have nothing but a black screen and some audio. We would like to publish and put out your work there. Also, musicians, if you are a musician, you can send us an audio clip of your work, and we can use it in the intro or in the outro or in the middle, and we can credit you. This can be an outlet for people to voice their concerns, their opinions, their comments, and whatnot. Also to show off their art, whether it be music, drawings, and whatever. Perhaps you'd like to perform a poetry reading. All of it is highly encouraged. Again, you can leave a comment. We can contact you. You could send an email to the Grady Southerner Podcast@gmail.com. That's going to be in the description. Or you can just talk to me in person. That isn't an issue whatsoever. If you would like to support the Southerner newspaper publication, however, because funding through that can also provide funding for us, your parents or whatnot, perhaps a friend or a neighbor, can subscribe to the Southerner. In doing so, would give them a copy of the Southerner, all the issues that the next year is to if you will, be put out. The funding goes to our equipment or the actual production of the papers themselves, as recently we aren't receiving as much funding as we used to, or at least at the very least, I don't think any from Grady directly. Money can go towards new equipment, whether it be a microphone, a recorder, or a camera. It can go to anything really. If you would like to support the Nexus magazine, you can head on to the Nexus website. The link will be in the description. You can also subscribe to that, whether it be your parent, yourself also, or a neighbor or a friend. Funding for that, however, goes directly to the Nexus publication. However, it is a very amazing publication led by Senior Lucy Rice, along a more than capable and amazing group and staff of sophomores and juniors and whatnot, and that published an awesome, visually appealing magazine. We hope to include articles and whatnot and content from the Nexus magazine onto the next podcast. Essentially, that is all. All the information will be included in the description. If you are confused in how you are able to support us again, you can contact GradySouthernerPodcast@gmail.com, or you can talk to me directly, or you can leave a comment, whether it be our SoundCloud outlet or our YouTube outlet. Our YouTube outlet will be published later than our SoundCloud outlet. However, please don't let that discourage you. If you have any recommendations and suggestions, we'll be more than happy to take them. Mr. Copeland, a guest of our last session, suggested a lot of things, including segments and whatnot. So you do definitely see a difference between the first session and the second session, this current session. And Mr. Copeland is a person to thank, because we are more than willing to accept suggestions. This is a brand new thing for us, and a brand new thing for you guys. And it really belongs to Grady, I feel, because we're borrowing GNN equipment. Southerner staff members partake in it, and we have people who are not affiliated with Southerner or GNN or any sort of publication coming along to the discussion. I'm more than happy to include multiple discussions and anyone and any sort of art or skill that you have that you're able to provide us. Be more than happy to receive that, and all people who do so will receive credit where credit is due. Your name will be called out and whatnot. And that is all, really. The description will include also another couple of links, including our Instagram and social media. Highly suggest you go there. It's run by Rachel Hassan and Gabby Payas, 2 seniors. They've done an amazing job, and I feel like it's a fun thing to follow, whether you're using Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. So that will be in the description. That really essentially ends our session for the month of December. You'll catch us in January. You missed us in November. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving break. And we hope that you have a wonderful winter break, a little rest of the semester. That essentially is all it. Thank you again for listening. It means a lot, and it supports a new outlet that can, again, further exemplify how it can be a voice of grading. Because sometimes, yeah, you probably can't be heard, you know. And yeah, that's all it. I'm your host, Nafez Zohbi. And thank you. Have an absolute nice one.